All right. Well, welcome everybody. Thank you so much for joining us today. Maybe let's just go right through it. Moses, tell us a little bit more about Common Cookery and how do we get started with HCC?
Thank you, Brenda. Common Cookery pretty much focus on everyday delights for the diaspora eater. Our main focus is to spotlight local, small, independent restaurants and private chefs and caterers from diverse communities through our curated marketplace. We feature all the specialty restaurants and connect them to what we call a diaspora eating group. We started the HCC just because of how deeply connected they are to the local community and the resources that they have to offer our small businesses that are looking to start up within the Houston space. They've been tremendously helpful in the journey. I can say for a fact that the minute we got connected with our HCC, things have moved so quickly to the point that we're now raising funds and we've even built a prototype that we're looking to scale to the MVP that we will be launching at the ending of July. Thank you, guys.
Well, and we're just so excited. I mean, July can't come any faster. But it's just amazing to see the transition from the idea into what you're doing now with us, like marketing campaign and making sure the community is involved. And then now in the panel, we have a couple of the people that guide you through the process, both Kimberly and Ned.
Mm-hmm.
Exactly, Moses. The least likely to survive in this current environment are going to be the small, single location, family owned, maybe immigrant run, woman run, people of color run operations. And so that is why it is so important to us to be supporting this effort and to create new market opportunities for this who are at risk, the small food creators to not only survive in this current environment, but also to excel when we are out of it, right? So, tell us more about, the current environment and the impact on all of the stakeholders.
So I just read an article last week on Business Insider that literally projected 85% of the small independent single location restaurants closing by December. That's huge when you think about the fact that these businesses tend to be key employers in the local communities they serve, right? A lot of these restaurants hire an average of 5 people, and these 5 people have families. So if you do the math, that's going to have significant economic impact locally. That is why in Common Cookery, our core focus is this demographic, especially those guys who cater to that diaspora eating community, right? It's no secret in the US that immigrants and women-owned businesses, right, make a good amount of small business groups out there, and they're very vital. And if these community of business owners get to pretty much be obliterated because of what we're dealing with right now, uh, there's just no telling what that social economic impact is going to be. And for us, it is important that we create a new market for them to be able to sell their product to a larger group out there. So for us, being able to help catalog and organize them digitally will really, really go a long way for these small businesses.
Well, and to be honest, it's just so scary, especially for like maybe the mom and pop, the family owned restaurants. I mean, I remember back when I was in high school, my dad had a restaurant. And because of the financial recession in 20, what was it, 2009, 2010, we had to
2008, yeah.
yeah, I mean, we ended up closing because, I mean, we weren't losing money, but we were, breaking even and we wanted to be at a risk of losing, everything. So, I mean, my heart goes to everybody who is dealing with this right now in the coronavirus, right? And so that's why we're having this tough conversations to understand maybe we can collaborate, maybe we can work with the community and partner with others who just make us stronger and survive this, right? Kimberly, from your expertise on the investor side, what can you tell us what the impact are with them?
Some of the information has changed with the onset of COVID-19. And so as we look at venture capital firms, for example, and investors, I found this really interesting article by Wiser Feedback, and they survey VCs very frequently to find out the temperature of the investing communities. And so in March, which was really as COVID-19 was really ramping up here in the United States, what they found was that 50%, actually a little bit more than 50% of VCs had halted all their new investments. And so that's really critical, especially for startups and for our mom and pops who are transitioning over to looking for funding. They were also looking to cut the current investments. And so if you were in an investment cycle, they may have made some changes as to how they would give you access to those funds, which can obviously impact your business model. And they were looking, VCs particularly were looking for over the next 12 months to kind of stay the course with that particular tone, less investing and being very mindful of how they were sharing the investments that they had already obligated. And so, what does that really mean? A lot of things. And I think that PPP, for example, also showed us how important having strong banking relationships and things were to kind of maybe offset the aspect of having investors and also having all of your documentation together. One of the things that we did also find with some of our more recent research is that startups, founders, and that whole ecosystem is actually, they're able to get to VCs and investors faster than at any other point in recently. So they're able to get these folks on the phone and get them into virtual meetings. And what that could mean is that when the economy changes, that they can start to reach back out to those organizations that have built a relationship with them and say, we might be interested in you now into making some type of investment. And that's really, really significant. We know that if you can't get in front of people, you certainly can't get them to necessarily invest in you. So I would encourage all of the food creators that we have access to today to start doing that research as to who may be interested in investing in you, and off you go and trying to get in touch with them.
And well, a lot is going on right now in Houston and Forbin County, for example. Just yesterday, they announced a $22 million fund going into small businesses, right? Like the grants. I actually just received a notice this morning from SBA that the EIDL, the disaster economic disaster loan, that's also opening up again. So let's just make sure that we're prepared and making sure that we have all the paperwork to get those funds, Give us your perspective. What have you seen?
Yeah, I 100% agree with everything that Kimberly has been saying. I think it's spot on. And this is an opportunity now as things are sort of stabilizing a little bit to get in front of investors. I think this is a good window of time, these next 3 months before the next wave of COVID hits. And just to hit on Kimberly's points, earlier on this year, investments portfolios for venture capital firms, they were focused on their portfolio companies that they've already invested in, making sure that, everything is in order in the house before they started taking on additional investments. Now it seems like those sort of opportunities are now solidified. So now they can start having more warm introductions, warm meetings. Investors are still making investments without meeting, which is probably one of the first times that this is happening. However, it's not as frequent, and I think it's going to be more of a relationship piece. And then just adding to Kimberly's point, right? We've seen and heard that investors think it's going to be around 9 more months until things really stabilize, as early as April 2021. So for those industries that are high growth, if any of you all that are listening that are in the food space, this is a great opportunity because food is booming, especially digital ordering, right? So this is a huge opportunity to get in front of investors and talk about the future of food and what that looks like, because the landscape has completely changed as well. So those are my thoughts around the current investment climate and just navigating through it. And it's never too early to just introduce yourself, reach out, and tell your story, keep them up to date with your journey, because at the end of the day, investing is a relationship business.
Mhm.
Great point. I mean, Brandy on the chat box was just mentioning that, it's like it's moving fast. She agrees with Kimberly's point. Even though some investing has halted, investors are more accessible during this times. But it is in a shorter cycle. It's like almost like you have to be ready and go, 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 right? Oh, Moses, good. Yeah, how are you guys seeing the business impact?
Oh, in terms of the investor space, so there are stricter guidelines, obviously. I know one of the panelists had mentioned, I believe it was Bomani, right? Talking about building that relationship and getting in front of investors earlier on. For those of you who are familiar with the Common Cookery journey up to date, it was one of the first things we actually did.
Yeah.
It's funny enough, right? These investors will pretty much tell you exactly what they're looking for, and you could sort of build your presentation to suit, right? But it's also important for you to have that business model solidified so that when you do get in front of them, you know exactly what you're talking about. You've proved your concept. And also to piggyback off of what Kimberly and Brenda just alluded to, right? There really are opportunities now, especially for minority-owned and women-owned businesses, to get easier access to whether it's angel investors or VCs that previously might not have been the case. So I would really, really encourage every prospecting business owner to really jump out there, get in front of investors, put your plan together. It doesn't have to be perfect, right? Go to these HCC folks, as well as like Impact Hub, and have them help you craft your business plan and score as well to get in front of these guys and be able to make a really, really good case.
Yeah, exactly. Take all those free resources out there, take advantage of it. We do actually, before we head into the next slide, we do have a couple of questions from Christina, for example. As an investor, what are the businesses that you're looking into invest in this current climate? And maybe I'll give this to Kimberly.
I think that's an excellent question, in that entrepreneurs, investors, VCs, and so forth need to be really careful to not try and catch a falling knife, as my grandmother would say. For example, trying to sell PPE, masks, and that type of inventory, you probably have missed that curve in the overall scheme of things, although it's still in high demand. And so as an investor, I would look at what's coming down the pike, which is why it's important that you all get in front of someone like myself who will invest in organizations to help me get a good feel as to what's viable. I know I want to get a return on my money. I want to make a profit, and I want to invest in things that I can determine and mitigate the risk. So in terms of what's out there, I'm expecting someone, particularly called a food creator, to come in and give me a good idea of what that would really mean, based upon maybe what some of my risk aversion would be at any given time. I noticed there was kind of a part two to Ms. Sanderson's question here, and is everything on hold? Absolutely not. Entrepreneurs can never be on hold. They've got to be thinking, be forward thinking, and oftentimes set the trend. I think COVID-19 has flattened some of the competitiveness that you may have had as a small food creator with some other organizations who may have had a different audience. And so you've got to take advantage of those things. You only drown when you stop moving. So you've got to stay active, read a lot, stay in touch, and create your own, even small networks of people that you can run ideas by, or just kind of talk your way through things. But as an investor, I'm looking for not the latest and greatest, because that's not my risk strategy, and profit strategy, but definitely what's coming down the pike and how can I take advantage of those things with a good team, which is that relationship building with like a small food creator, for example.
Definitely. And so the big takeaway, and we had it on the chat box, entrepreneurs can never be on hold. Thank you for that, Kimberly. It's true. Bomani, tell us more about the impact of the current environment for the small food creators you have noticed.
Yeah, it's been interesting. I think it's been a wave of different emotions, and on one side, I think there's two sides of the coin, right? So when COVID first hit, it was very clear that if you had a digital presence, you had more opportunities to generate incremental revenue, reach out to your existing client base, sort of keep them up to date with what's going on from a social standpoint. We also saw that businesses that didn't have a digital presence, whether it's an Instagram account, a website, anywhere to get more information on the restaurant, those restaurants have really been having challenges because they might have not have thought that the digital presence was as serious. So now we're seeing that it's not even debatable at this point that you need to have a digital presence to understand who you are, what you have to offer, and why you're great, right? So now restaurants are shifting to having that mindset now, which is unfortunate based on the times, but I do think it's a positive thing for restaurants to start thinking about these things. And then also what we've seen is that from COVID, restaurants now are thinking about delivery, right? And trying to get on delivery platforms, any way to get any incremental revenue they're interested in because they want to keep the lights on, right? They want to keep the business afloat. Closing their doors is detrimental. And we've seen, I'm sure across the world, there's thousands and thousands of restaurants that have opened or closed their doors that haven't been able to reopen and may never reopen based on the circumstances. So that's what I've seen a little bit in the industry from, the start of COVID to now. I think restaurants are opening up a little bit more. There's customized meal kits that they're providing for people to pick up and come and have those meals at home, to customized drink menus, to specials. So they're getting creative with the times, which is good because that means that there's a renaissance, I like to call, and a new innovation that's happening within the space, and everyone's starting to see that and get excited and grab hold of that.
Well, and to be honest, for the Medici effect to really happen here, where the innovation between collaborators and just everybody from different industries come together for solutions. And we have a great, in the chat box, we have a great point that John offered. I mean, on the business plans, yes, you can work on the business plans, but we have to make sure all in the field that we have a what if, right? Like we have to make sure that we include the risks, especially if you're in Houston, for example, like maybe a hurricane can happen. Like what if that happens while we're in coronavirus, and what will you do? I mean, transportation is not as open, right? So like what if, you'll have to put those details and flesh it out for your business. Ned or Kimberly, give us your thoughts about the impact for the small food creators.
It's and to the previous point, what if is critical, and we're talking about pivoting now in the COVID-19 environment. When it was hard, we were talking about resilience, and that's all of these sort of wrap up together. In order to be able to pivot, I have to have some sort of resilience in my business and a flexibility in thinking. So don't get locked into just your primary plan, but when you start looking at alternatives, don't go down to the tiny littlest detail and not be able to adjust as necessary.
Yes, to Ned's point, I think that being prepared for a disaster, as you define a disaster as an organization, is critical. My original background is tech, and so disaster preparedness and recovery is just paramount to the success of any organization. And the same thing holds true in terms of your business plan. And whether you're in Gulf Coast state, such as Texas, Louisiana, California, earthquakes, Midwest, tornado after tornado, every region of the United States and the world. I know that we've got some amazing attendees that are even in Nigeria, for example. We've got to be prepared for those things. One of the things I would encourage folks to do is to for example, go look at your insurance pieces again and see, what they cover, or if you need to have insurance if you haven't had it. I think that COVID-19 has been an opportunity to reset. You want to survive this and you want to thrive, because you can't make money surviving. You've got to thrive. But you can also look and see what is it that we need to do to be shored up for either wave 2 or whatever else may be coming our way. And speaking and building relationships again with your insurance company, paying employees, what's your plan if you have to do something different than what you've been doing, but certainly different than what you did a year ago.
Most definitely. And I see a couple of other comments also on the chat box. Like Rachel, when she went to Louisiana over the weekend, and most of them are still closed. Those that are open have limited seating. So to Bomani's point, I mean, having a digital presence is probably the way to go right now for a lot of the small businesses. What else? And then from Doug, maybe the face-to-face opportunity to engage is so limited that it is so important to make those connections and get those emails from clients, making sure that you are on their top of mind. Because I think right now everything's online, right? So it's so hard to get attention. So anything that you can do with social media efforts and having sort of like what we do at the center, we have constant contact, for example, or like email chimp, I think is the other one. And so that's how we are still tracking or making sure our people know the types of webinars we have. So totally agree. All right, so we talked about investors, we talked about the impact on small food creators. Maybe let's go with the community overall. Let's start with you, Ned. What is the impact that you've seen for the community overall?
First of all, we have to define what do we mean by community, because the greater Houston area, which actually includes Galveston County, large parts of Fort Bend, goes all the way out west to Katy, and also points north and almost to the northeast, out just up short of Beaumont. Every one of those, as we've seen, has sort of its own characteristic. The demographics tend to be different. You have, for instance, the River Oaks community out towards the medical center is far different in the impact of COVID than what we look at and see in East End and other parts of the community. Overall, what's happened, there are some things we know. Social interaction outside the family has decreased, and travel and activities away from home have decreased. The biggest impact on that oftentimes is the hospitality industry, and that's what we're seeing with the restaurateurs right now. Work activity varies significantly. So if I have more of the tech savvy who have the resources to be able to, and also the type of work where they can work at home virtually, those folks are still pretty actively engaged in the economy. If I have someone who has to be out there physically doing the job, or garbage men or grocery store shelf stockers, things like that, they have to be out there and exposed to it. And we'll talk about some business impacts on that in a second. One of the things we're seeing, and I look at this as a bright spot, oftentimes occupations that were overlooked or even worse, looked down upon, we find are essential to societal functioning and us being able to do things. So the folks who come pick up the garbage and keep our streets clean, the folks who stock the grocery stores, the truckers, people who work in warehousing and distribution, those folks oftentimes are hidden away from a lot of the community and society, but we're finding that they are essential to our functioning. And one of the good things about that is it teaches us that there's dignity in any honest work on there, and everyone is essential to us functioning as a society.
Most definitely. I mean, I think even here in Houston, I started seeing even the bigger restaurants trying to cater on HEB, for example. So the effort of community, like working with grocery chains and making sure that you have the deliveries, you have your presence online, but also maybe even working with big chains like HEB, right, to be able to sell your products as a solution. How about you, Bomani? You're in California. How is the community over there?
Yeah, I couldn't agree more with Ned. I think that the community piece is huge. I think we're really starting to see a shift, almost as the financial collapse in 2008, where people banded together and started really focusing on what community means. And I think that now's the opportunity where we're talking more about, hey, how do we benefit other pieces of the community, right? Not just restaurants, but how do we benefit healthcare workers? How do we benefit food banks? How do we benefit the local community departments, right? We all want to come together. And I think organically, we all want to benefit our own community first before we spread out. And there just seems to be a huge movement around that in various different ways, and it's great. And I think it's long overdue. And I'm happy that that's happening, given the unfortunate circumstances that we're facing today.
Yeah, I think even in the dark times, entrepreneurs always have this light, we find a way of making it happen and finding solutions and coming together for solutions, right? So maybe, Kimberly, can you tell us more also what you see from the local community or any thoughts?
Sure, I'm over here taking notes because I'm learning a lot from our fellow panelists. So absolutely. What comes to mind for me is that we're all globally connected. And so local community can mean a lot of things once we really define what those things are. And adversity, often brings out the best in people or sometimes the worst in people. And so what we're seeing with COVID-19 is a shift in maybe what we value, as Ned and Bomani so eloquently, stated that. And we're seeing that small businesses, our small, cookeries and eateries and things are really things that are important to our overall community. These are folks who live in our community, go to church with us, or we see them at the grocery store, but we also go in and order food. And so I think that defining what community means, and it's such a dynamic kind of phrase that it shifts and changes. And again, when we see something that's been so life-changing for all of us, no matter what your income level is, you've been impacted by COVID-19. And we see and know, because we read a lot of stuff, that small businesses are the backbones of our economy, and most certainly our local communities. And so really being in touch with those and knowing that, especially for our food creators, that you're just a valuable part of our community, especially for somebody like me who likes to eat a whole bunch. I don't know how to cook. So I need you guys to thrive and to be innovative. And I want to support you. I know I heard from myself and other friends who we were tipping, restaurants that were open 50%, 100%, of what our checks and things would typically be, knowing that they have to keep their doors open. I don't want to drive past, whether I'm in Nigeria, in any place, and a place that I have enjoyed is now closed because of lack of patronage, or I just didn't know that you were still open or struggling or keeping something going. So, you're part of the community, you are the community, and we want to support and help you grow and thrive in this particular piece. So those are the things that I probably could add to the conversation.
Yeah. Full points, really. I think I'm a foodie myself as well, and I love international food. So we made sure we had some sushi last week, and making sure like once a week at least we have our small businesses around us. Like if we have an option, like we go with the smaller ones instead of like the big businesses open. So we have a question for you from Christina. She's saying, how do you find yourself leveraging your business with your community? Why do you feel this essential for not only your platform, but for all businesses as a whole? And last question, where do you see the role for the investor on this journey?
I mean, those are a great series of questions. For us, Common Cookery, right? I see us being perfectly suited to the current environment in the sense that our business model aligns with our community. We've always had that social focus in our business model, right? By being mission driven and having the public benefit at heart. it's part of the reason why we decided we wanted to do that hard work of going after the smaller mom and pop restaurants within the communities, and bringing them into one space, right, and organizing them to even have access to a bigger market. If you notice, a lot of the bigger guys, right, the Door Dashes and the Grubbers, typically they do that just because of how hard it can be to organize these groups, and keep them consistently performing. So it's not just building a digital platform and putting them out there. There's a lot of offline activities that is required, right, to really support these smaller independents to even be able to fulfill orders consistently and to even be able to grow and really become that revenue generating body that now goes on to employ people within that community and now also contributes as a whole to the community, right? So for us, giving them resources such as giving them access to maybe larger production spaces that they may not be able to access, for instance, right? Building that network with other like commercial kitchen groups that may be out there. That is a way of really aligning with the current environment for them to be able to fulfill our production, right? As far as the investors portion goes, right? One of the things I've noticed in the investor space is there is this push for a social good within your business. It's not only become attractive to investors, right? Or just beyond, say, trying to make profits and return on investment, right? But they've also seen the real-time benefit of having that quasi-corporate social responsibility embedded in your investing model. So increasingly, you're going to come across investors that are going to ask you about that. What is the benefit to the larger community as a whole, for what you're offering? And we just thought about this earlier on as we were setting the common cookery model and positioned ourselves in front of investors saying, look, we're going to make money with this, right, one way or the other. But the bigger benefit is we want to have a larger impact, not only in our immediate community, but as we expand to other cities, right, also impact the various communities that are clustered within those cities themselves.
Right, exactly. And plus you're giving sort of like a platform that is not available right now, especially like when it comes to like private chefs, right? And so you're working with them as well. So it's a win-win. Ned, I know you mentioned you had two more points before we head into the slide. So jumping into you.
Yeah, just from a general perspective, the first one is on the nature of the recovery. I think we all sort of made the assumption that the recovery would be, we started opening up again, it would be sort of a homogeneous increase in activity and almost a steady slope. What we're in fact seeing, especially since unfortunately Houston has now become one of the hot spots, is recovery will probably happen in fits and starts. So you'll go forward, take a couple of steps back, maybe a couple of steps forward, but it's not going to be steady progress. So comments made earlier about flexibility and resiliency and being able to shift with your business plan are more important now than ever. The other thing is when we talk nonprofits, part of those resources, which we'll talk about at greater length at the end, but when you look at SBA, MBDA, others like that, and some of the programs like EILT, Paycheck Protection Program, stuff like that, I can't overemphasize how necessary it is to have a good relationship with the community banker on there. And the PPP, the second tranche, as of a few days here, as of the end of last week, they still had $120 billion left in there. But you can't get to that unless you get a banker to help you with some of these things.
Thank you for that. And then before we go into the slide, any questions from the audience?
Brenda, I wanted to add something if I can while the audience looks to present a question possibly. I want to push back a little bit on the social good. I think businesses are for profit, and you can get to a place in your financials where you're able to contribute more heavily to organizations, nonprofits, and things to that capacity. But a small business owner, their focus should be on making a profit and understanding their role in the overall economy, which again is the backbone, particularly here in the United States, for our economy. We have more small businesses than we have big giant Googles and Facebooks and things, Nikes, things to that capacity. And so there's a time it's a timing issue sometimes as to when you need to cover the social good. So what I would encourage a food creator to do is, if you're looking to do a loan, a line of credit, or even so much as where you keep your checking account, make sure that those organizations are philanthropic and are often supporting food banks and other things, elementary schools, whatever it is that you have a good interest in, that in the future you're looking to also support them in. But your goal is to make a profit, and again, not survive, but to thrive, not to be rhyming things to that capacity, and to keep people employed. And so the social good, push back on those VCs or investors and say, I'm coming to you because you help and do the kind of work that I'm looking to do as I continue to grow. And right now I'm being lean and mean. So that's just something I would definitely like to add. There'll come a time when you can write a check and you won't blink about it. But that might not be not only during the middle of a pandemic, if we're even in the middle, but also at an earlier stage of your organization's first several years particularly.
Moses, we have another question. What is the impact of this current environment on the food delivery apps you have noticed?
Oh, so for the food delivery apps, right, their primary business model was on-demand delivery, right? So you go on DoorDash, for instance, you look for, say, a Chinese takeout, you order it, and the goal is to receive your food 30 minutes or less, right? But we're noticing changes in that regard because the pandemic definitely impacted that model initially, right? When restaurants had to temporarily close for about a month or so. So a lot of the food delivery, on-demand food delivery sector, right? Even though they've bounced back and they're thriving in this space just by being digital, we're noticing a consolidation amongst the big guys because it's very expensive to run a wholesale on-demand delivery program. So for instance, Grubhub and Just Eat out of Europe, right, announced a merger yesterday. I mean, this past week. We're also noticing exits from markets. So Uber Eats recently announced that they were pulling out of some cities because it was no longer profitable to operate within those cities. And then customers too are leaving a lot of these platforms just because of the high service fees, as well as the high sales commissions that are charged to restaurants, which you can imagine in this environment, right? It's a big hit to the margins of especially the small independents. Then we're noticing increased competition and innovation in this space. You're seeing marketplaces that are coming up now that are challenging this existing on-demand model by just setting up a digital marketplace, really organizing local restaurants within a certain community, putting them online and having them go that scheduled delivery route and driving pickups. Customers are home now, right? So, because of COVID, so a lot of people are really prepared to maybe go like pick up the food to get out of the house and catch some fresh air. Others, are not in such of a rush anymore to get the food 30 minutes or less. And that really played an important role in the designing of our digital marketplace, right? Building those local community networks for one, where we're looking to greet restaurants, right, within communities and drive that pickup model because we want to encourage the local customers to be able to like at least support the local restaurants, where that focus on really pushing our small food creatives, right, You mentioned earlier on the private chefs and caterers. The businesses have taken a hit, right? That's a component where we're really driving and hoping to bring them into our platform as well to be able to do those private like meal kits events, and subscription services in addition to the smaller regular restaurants we're going to bring. And as I previously mentioned, the resource match services. So I will really use this avenue to really shout out the small businesses that are on this webinar. I think we have some small caterers and small restaurateurs. Keep doing what you're doing. You don't have to rely on the big on-demand platforms anymore. There are different options for you to put your food out there and be able to get increased margins, and Common Cookery is one of them. And I think it really ties back to what Kimberly is saying too, right? Pushing back on those VCs that are demanding some sort of a social good, right? Because at the end of the day, it is a business impact, right? We went out to the Yard House last week, and much like Kimberly, we did that 100%, of the bill tip as well, right? We want to support these local guys, right? By making sure they have jobs and they stay open. So that's the bottom line. And with that, as far as like the impact to the delivery apps, that's our difference, and this is what we're seeing in the space at the moment.
No, and what I love is that you're collaborating with others like communi with Crave It, right? So Crave It gives your perspective on this collaboration and your food delivery apps.
Yeah, I agree with everything that Moses has been saying. I think there's a shift, right? On one end, delivery is increasing because people are at home. But on the other end, people are tired of the large fees that delivery is taking, both on the diner side as well as on the restaurant side. The restaurants are getting gouged with delivery fees. They want incremental revenue to keep their business afloat, but they don't want to break even just because they're doing delivery, right? So now they're starting to think of what are ways that we can continue to drive incremental revenue without cutting so much of the profit under us, whether that's creating our own delivery platform, whether it's merging with something that's local, whether it's trying different platforms that are new to the market. Another thing that we all know as well is that there's no loyalty in delivery platforms, right? Most people have 1 to 4 different apps, right? And the reason that you have so many apps is because you're trying to figure out which restaurants are open for which delivery app, right? There's not sort of a one-stop shop for your eating needs where you can go to this one app and say, hey, if I want delivery or pickup, all the major local restaurants that I love are on this platform. And I don't have to think about, is that on DoorDash, Grubhub, Uber Eats? And that's a little bit of what we're doing at Crave It, is aggregating that so you don't have to worry about which platform is serving which restaurant. And we're making sure that we're driving lower fees and so focusing directly on incremental revenue for the restaurant at that local level, which everyone wants to support. And to Moses' point, we're seeing that from a delivery standpoint, it is a fragmented market and it's becoming more and more consolidated, right? Because as we know, with some of the bigger players in the delivery space, they're not generating any profit, right? And they're trying to eat up other companies. They're trying to merge to essentially be one of the 1 or 2 players. I truly believe there's only going to be 1 or 2 players left at the end of the day in the delivery space. So this provides ways for other companies to be a little bit more innovative and focusing on the actual pickup experience that we all know and love, and really supporting restaurants head on without having to, get gouged by delivery. But it'll be pretty interesting to see how the market continues to innovate. We might see that delivery now will come from drones or robots in the future, or self-driving cars, and not necessarily people, right? So I think there's a lot of opportunity for innovation, and there's a lot of opportunity to truly help local restaurants thrive, as well as creating an opportunity for the business or startup that you're creating to thrive with them as well. But what we all have to do is we have to listen to one another, right? It starts with the restaurant, it starts with the diner. If you're not understanding their needs and what's valuable to them, we're not going to move forward and innovation is not going to happen, because you're just going to build technology just for the sake of building technology and not keeping the diner and the restaurant in mind, which is critical to the success of the future of our industry.
And
Wow.
if I'm sorry, Brenda, if I may touch on a key point in the chat, right, that ties into what Bomani just said. I think it was Doug who really mentioned how that researcher from '08, right, drove your customers to seek value. And so you saw the rise of like the general dollar stores, right? You're going to see something similar in the online food ordering space, right? Cost is extremely vital to businesses right now, so is margins, right? So taking into consideration and building a delivery portal, or even just the e-marketplace that considers the cost to the actual customers, is going to be important. Part of the reason why we all have multiple delivery apps on our phones, right, is sometimes too, you're taking into consideration, who is doing a particular promo at this particular time that will save you that extra delivery fee, right? And similarly, the restaurateurs look at that too, in terms of whether they want to like offer their menu on those platforms or not. And I think between Omani and I, that's something our platforms are taking into consideration, right? Really offering that low cost option for the customers to be able to get to the eaters at the end of the day.
What are the next steps for Common Cookery, and how can the community help you?
Oh yeah, sure. So far we have engaged 400 caterers and small restaurants. We've built a prototype. We're building it into the MVP stage that is scheduled to launch at the ending of July. We are fundraising right now to be able to scale fully and really go live in Houston come October, as well as expanding to other cities pretty quickly. For us, right, you can really help us by supporting our development and go-to-market efforts. We encourage you to join our user focus group because as we're testing between July and September, we're going to be doing real-time improvements. We also encourage you to join our development advocacy team, and you can certainly stay in the loop with us by completing the post-webinar survey that is going to come out after this webinar. Join our Slack channel, and then we have another webinar scheduled for 10 a.m. same time next week. So those are the ways that you can really stay in the loop and support us. And shout out Common Cookery in Houston, we're coming.
I can't wait. I hope everybody on the audience as well. And then, we can actually stay a couple more minutes if you are flexible with your time. I just want to make sure that you know that it is already 11. But it's such a great conversation, and I don't want it to end. Bomani, also, before we even talk about our HEC resources, how can the community help you as well?
Yeah, I like to say just really quickly, it's been a great discussion. It's always good to get different perspectives. We're all tuning in from across the country and across the world. I think we all share the same common love of food, as well as supporting the local community. Ways which you can support Crave It at this point is following me on LinkedIn, as well as following our Instagram account Crave It SF, and staying up to date with what we're doing. We're launching our new beta the next couple of weeks, and we're looking to expand. We're raising capital at the moment, and just following our story and our journey. We are focused on local restaurants and building shareable experiences across multiple people. Food is community and it's social, and that's what we're doing. So any support on LinkedIn or Instagram would be much appreciated as we continue to move forward in our journey.
So I'm going to follow you with everything and look at all those beautiful pictures of food you have on your.
Awesome. Please do.
Well, and I also wanted to just have the opportunity to tell you what HEC is doing in the community. I'm the lead of this the Center for Entrepreneurship in the Southeast campus, but we also have the Northwest and Southwest. So, you know, if you're from Houston, we're huge, and we all have different kinds of initiatives and efforts in our area. So please make sure that you know about all these webinars happening in our centers at hccs.edu/small business. I'm also very active on posting all kinds of webinars that we're offering on our social media. So also make sure if you're on a Facebook page, please make sure to add @HCC Entrepreneurship. We also are bigger than that. We have the Department of the Goldman Sachs 10,000 Small Businesses. That is really for businesses who have been around for 2 to 5 years and have a team of at least 20 members, but it's almost an accelerated process to grow capacity. So if you're at that level, make sure that you check their upcoming cohort in the fall. I think applications are still open. We also have the Minority Business Development Agency, and they're the ones who focus on preparing you as a business, as an already grown business, to get contracts with government. There's a lot of grants, for example, when it comes to minorities, but you have to make sure you have all this like legal and paperwork ready. So they are helpful with that information. And lastly, the corporate college is almost like a school for your business. So if you're already a big restaurant and you need to train your employees with HR and financials or anything that's helpful for them, think of the corporate college. A lot of this is for free, to be honest, because it comes with a grant from the Department of Labor. So it's really free for our CEOs out there who would like to get training for your employees.
You can follow us on Instagram at Common Cookery, Twitter at Common Cookery, Facebook at Common Cookery, and LinkedIn /Common Cookery. It's all in the chat field. Be looking out, we'll be doing these engagements, these virtual engagements locally, as well as in other cities. And we have exciting stuff in the works that we'll be launching in a month or thereabout. And we'll definitely be on those found in the parents virtually or social distance wise.
Healthy.